I think crank length is one of the most overlooked and expensive aspects when it comes to setting up your bike, but if used correctly, it can lead to comfort and performance improvements. So to find out if you should consider a change or if it's all just a complete waste of time, got a bike fit expert.
Hi.
Absolutely nailed that, mate. Good work. Jake, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
Now, Jake is a genuine real-life expert, and you're going to help us out. Yeah. So, in terms of crank length, I think where on earth should we even start discussing this? I guess at maybe a beginner level.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best.
Yeah.
The best place to start.
So, first thing to discuss is what on earth actually is crank length? What are we talking about?
It's the part that we connect to our pedals to, really, which allows us to pedal in circles and move the bike.
Okay, so if people are sat there thinking, well, okay, I've got cranks on my bike, but I don't really know what you're talking about. Well, the cranks come in a variety of different lengths. Yeah. Some people will know that, some people might not. And I guess what is the idea behind having different lengths crank? Why do we have longer and shorter ones?
It's basically to consider in their sort of range of movement, or rider's range of movement, and or their limb length.
Okay, so typically we'll see crank lengths supplied on bikes of around 170 to up to 175 millimeters long. There's three options: 170, 172.5, and 175. But are there options that are longer or shorter than that in the extreme, should we say?
Absolutely, yeah. I've seen crank lengths down to 155. Millimeters and
super short.
Super short.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. But you also get them 165, 180. There is, I don't know if they still actually make it, but there was a 177.5.
Oh, real specific.
Real specific. I don't know why they even needed to do that, but yeah, it's there. So,
in general terms, how does the crank length affect the range of movement that you have? So we're referring to hips mostly.
Yeah, most of the time the rider's hips, if they're a little bit limited or they can't sort of if you imagine sort of trying to touch your toes, you can't close your hips up too much on a very, very simple format. We might need a shorter crank to allow the hip to stay open when they're actually pedaling the bike, which then reduces the risk of injury, improves the efficiency, and in turn, if you're more comfortable, you're going to be more efficient anyway.
How are you going to know that what is installed on your bike is actually correct? How do you know that it's right first?
Well, you may not.
You might. Oh, wow.
It's kind of hard to know what is correct unless you do go through the relevant steps of understanding what your body's limitations are.
Yeah.
And why you may benefit from a shorter crank.
A pretty clear indicator that you need to make a change or something could be off is if you've got an injury or you're finding that you've got a persistent niggle in your knee or your hip, or you're finding that your movement's limited on the bike. Is that right?
Okay, so the common things that you may find if your crank length is wrong or potentially not optimal is some knee pain, some hip pain, some pedaling alignment issues. Yeah. Potentially your pedal stroke isn't as smooth. Granted, you might need to try a different crank length to actually know that difference.
You reckon if if I went and stole Ollie's bike, changed his crank length from 2.5 mil, a small change to the next size down, you don't reckon you'd notice?
No.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I don't think so, no. I'm going to go no.
So obviously when you're doing a bike fit, you're using a combination of cutting edge technology, your own experience, hands-on, feeling where sort of the joints are on people's knees and hips, and obviously your experience from seeing hundreds, thousands of different people. Yeah. But I guess, do you find it's really beneficial to have that specific data from pieces of measuring technology, like the sensors that can be put onto the body?
I think when you're looking at sort of very, very fine, small changes, yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I never personally rely on that system or that data capture 100% because I feel like you have to call on your own experience and also the rider's feedback. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. Do you think there's a way people could assess their crank length themselves at home without having to come and see someone with an in-depth knowledge on it?
I would say probably not.
Yeah.
Unless they are, like you say, unless they even know their body inside out and know they have, if it goes simple, hip impingement or hip limitations, without sort of seeing someone to say you have this imbalance or this impingement, they're probably not going to know they need to change their crank length. Personally, when I'm carrying out bike fits, yes, crank length is definitely on my radar every bike fit, just to make sure we're not causing any issues to the rider. But we're also making sure that I don't recommend someone to go make an expensive change for no reason. In theory, there is a standard crank length that we see. So if you have, like, say, a 58 centimetre bike, you're probably going to see a 175 crank length.
Yeah.
If you have someone on a 56, 54, they're probably going to be 172 and a half. I'm not entirely sure where these standards have come from, but that is generally what you're going to see on the bikes.
Is there a way that you think changing your cranks can alter how you can position your body on the bike for a performance and aero benefit?
Absolutely. You know, if you're running a shorter crank, you can lower your back angle, which then can ultimately lower your frontal area as well. All in tune with actually keeping the hip open as well.
So what's the theory behind that? So you're saying you can lower your back angle. Is that purely on the basis of your knee isn't going to be coming up so high? Yeah,
basically you're not, your sort of flexion of your knee isn't coming up as high, so you're not restricting your body as much. I think it's big in and more necessary in triathlon and TT, because people are looking for that aero advantage. You know, it's, with the research and stats out there that we have, you know, this is definitely a big shift of how people are riding. So making this change is definitely increasing performance. And sometimes a shorter crank for triathletes is purely just so they can run off the bike efficiently. Especially if you're doing a full Ironman, you know, you've got 180k, especially if you're doing a flat course, you might be in that aero position for 5 hours, 6 hours.
Give me a sort of ballpark figure. Are we saying a 170? Are we saying, like, find some more extreme crank length options?
I generally hover around the sort of like 165, 170 range.
So that is quite short, isn't it, for what typically people would see on their road bikes?
Yeah.
Is there a reason why we can't just go shorter and shorter with cranks?
It can cause you to struggle to get on top of that gear a little bit too much if you go too short. So we have to keep that in consideration. And this differs for everyone, so there isn't like a black and white rule that is definite as such.
So shorter cranks, you need to make sure you've got appropriate gearing in the system to, I guess, account for the fact you've got a shorter lever.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah. I'm going to get kitted up. You maybe just, I don't know, put your feet up, have a coffee,
I'm going to have coffee, yeah.
That's free tea and coffee.
Definitely having a coffee then.
All right, see you in a minute.
See you in a bit. Okay, thank you so much for the tea and coffee.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Do you leave your money on the side?
Yeah, I'll do it later.
Okay, right, what's going on here then?
So what I've done is I've taken your bike, grabbed the measurements off it roughly, transferred it onto this bike here, and I've noticed you ride 170 cranks on your bike.
Correct.
Completely ignored it. And I've gone for 175.
Fantastic.
Okay? For the reason of trying to show yourself and everyone the difference between like the extremes, so like a 175 crank length to a 165 crank length.
So is that what the most we can do on these cranks? So there's 5 different options here.
Yeah, there's 5 different options on this crank here.
But we're only going to focus on the 2 extremes.
Yeah, purely because it'll be easier to show the differences around it.
Well, we've already mentioned that the changes between one individual crank length is quite subtle and tricky to find. So hopefully, this makes it super clear and visual. So what's next? I guess I better get on the bike, should I?
Yeah, I think we better get on the bike and get some pedalling done.
Right, let's do it.
Alex, if you start riding for me.
Yeah.
Alex is currently riding with the 175 crank length, which in theory closes his hip angle a lot more than he would do when he rides the 165 shortly.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a few different positions that you can ride in, and we can monitor how much your hip angle can close. Whether that rider is riding on the hoods like Alex is now, or whether if you want to change to the drops.
The drops brings my sort of chest lower to the handlebars.
Exactly, and we can see how the hip angle is closed again. And if we look at a really extreme position, maybe like on a TT position.
So I can just rest my arms on the bars, I guess, sort of like this. Okay, you can feel.
You might get the UCI after you on that one though. But anyway.
I can feel the difference of how much it's sort of really coming up towards my chest, my knees and thigh. Yeah,
and this is probably the most visual difference we're going to see in terms of how much this hip angle is closed. Now, we kind of know that Alex's hips don't have any limitations or impingements.
Oh, these hips don't lie, Jake.
They do not. So we're not seeing any adverse pedaling alignment or any hip sort of kickback in terms of the knee wanting to pop out at the top of the pedal stroke, but we can see that visual closure of the hip.
It is noticeable. I mean, I know that you've just told me they're 175 cranks, but I do feel like because there's a bigger jump from what I normally ride, I can tell the difference on that. Shall we change the position of these cranks?
Yep, change the cranks, and then we'll see the differences.
I'll do the hard work, you sit there, don't worry.
Can I have another coffee?
Yeah.
165's on, okay. Way easier than changing a chain set.
Yeah.
Let's get you on the bike and we can see how you feel with riding with a shorter crank now.
You sit down, I'll do the hard work.
Thank you very much.
Lovely. Even just as I'm getting started pedaling now, already, it's like I can instantly tell there's a huge change in my cranks, and it's almost like leading me to say that it feels like my saddle's now too low.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty valid point. When we do a big change like 10 mil, that could definitely warrant a saddle height change. Maybe just a 5 mil or you know, around that sort of.
To sort of compensate for the change.
Compensate the change.
Okay,
exactly.
so what are some of the differences that we can see from this crank length now?
So when we compare the difference between the 175 crank and the 165 crank, we can really see how the hip is just not being closed up as much.
Yeah.
Which in theory is just keeping the hip open.
Yeah.
Reducing your risk of injury, possibly allowing you to then come down a little bit lower and in the front end of the bike, and allowing us to improve our efficiency for our pedal stroke.
So in fact, I'll ride on the drops now, and I can already feel that, like you say, opening up the hip angle, which I guess if I stop my leg towards the top of the pedal stroke, roughly there, we're talking about this difference here. So this angle off my hip to my thigh relative to my torso, is that right?
Exactly, yeah. So from the torso to the hip and sort of coming down the femur here, sometimes the easiest place to see it is the gap in between sort of like the stomach and the top of the thigh. Just from a reference point rather than sort of trying to get into the nitty-gritty angles as such.
So then when we had the longer crank set in, I also rode in like a more extreme time trial-esque type position. So if I do that now, I can again feel the difference that just quite simply my knees aren't coming up as high.
No, exactly. And again, that gap is obviously closed more from when the two previous positions were. But in comparison to the 175 again, it's definitely a lot more open. Which
you can see how it does impact people that are doing time trials and triathlon in such a huge way, because you'd never ride like this on a road bike.
No.
But
No, exactly not. But I mean, on a TT triathlon sort of scenario, you're going to end up having a lower frontal area, which is going to allow you to be more aerodynamic. And plus, like I said earlier, about being able to run off the bike. Okay,
that's really interesting to not only experience that extreme difference myself, but be able to clearly visualise it for everyone at home. Before we wrap this thing up, I've got a couple of quick fire questions I want to throw at you.
Sure thing, yeah.
So do you think everybody should be looking at changing or investigating into their crank lengths firstly for beginners and then for more experienced riders?
Yeah, I was going to say it's kind of a bit of a two-answer question, really. I mean, if you're new to cycling, recreational, and you're not experiencing any issues or pains or injuries, potentially we don't need to disrupt that area, for that person. If you're trying to find those marginal gains, maybe it's something you might want to investigate in, and potentially if you are feeling some pains as well, obviously, then that's something we should do.
Okay, that's very helpful. Does altering our crank length, change the muscle groups that we're using?
In theory, no, because if the bike is set up properly, we should still be recruiting the same muscles to ride efficiently and the right power that we want to sustain. Okay, so that's interesting. I was assuming that it might have changed it, but no, fair enough. There could be subtle differences, but I mean, in theory, the same muscles are going to be recruited.
Okay, now in I think a few weeks' time, actually, I'm doing the track national champs. I'm going to race the individual pursuit. Now, Ollie tells me I've got to use short cranks. It's like it's going to revolutionise your cycling. Use short cranks. Is he right, and is it something I should investigate further into? Yeah, I do agree with Ollie. Yeah, you should definitely investigate that. I think going back to sort of some of the points you made, you can potentially look at improving your frontal area, like aerodynamic gain. But obviously as well, keep an eye on your gear ratio, making sure that you can actually ride efficiently and don't come into any problems from going too short. Okay, right. No, all that I guess I need to say is thanks for coming down and talking through crank length with us. I found it really interesting. I hope everyone at home has found it interesting as well. And I guess, what's our sort of main takeaway message from this? So the main takeaway message from this is if you don't really have any issues, maybe don't go searching to find an issue or solving an issue. If it's not broken, don't fix it. And if you are looking for those marginal gains, looking to sort of make a little bit of an improvement to your performance, potentially it's something you might want to look at. But
that's basically the take on that, I
All
would
right,
say.
that's the crux of it. I'm really keen to hear everyone else's thoughts on this as well. Let us know in the comments section down below what crank length you run and what you think is optimal setup for maybe everyday today riding.
Yeah.
And also, let us know in the comments section if you want to see more bike fit tech related videos with Jake, because I'm going to convince him to come back if we can. More free coffee for you.
That's probably the only... No, I'm joking. No, I'd love to come back.
It better not be the only reason he came down. Right, we're going to get out of here. Jake's going to make the most of free coffee before he goes home.
Definitely.
See you later. Right.
Perfect.
Cheers, Jake.
Cheers.
Boom.